Hi, everybody. Oh, recording is in progress. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to a session on ChatGPT. I'm sure a lot of people are talking about ChatGPT at this conference. I've attended a number of really great presentations so far. So what I hope to do is not repeat anything anyone else is saying. I'm assuming that people here probably do know something basic about the LLM system, and that I shouldn't try to explain everything. But I do want to give you some very practical ideas about what we can do with ChatGPT. And I must say I was very heartened by the MIT Technology Review headline this morning saying that ChatGPT will not destroy higher education. In fact, it's a very useful tool, which is pretty much what I am here to say. So I'll give you some examples of how useful it is and start with a general overview. So I'm going to share my screen. And is that visible?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So people can speak up and let me know if there's anything that you cannot see that is really irritating to you. How's that? Is anything on my screen cut off?
No, all looks good on this end.
Sorry?
It looks good.
All right, perfect. Okay, so my topic is teaching writing and ethics with ChatGPT, and to give you a sense of who I am, I'm the director of the Herbst Program for Engineering, Ethics, and Society in the College of Engineering at CU Boulder. So we teach writing and ethics to engineers. We particularly have a number of pretty intensive writing seminars for only 12 students. That's the class limit. So we do lots of iterative writing, a great deal of one-on-one attention. And then also I'm teaching this semester a course with over 50 students in it, where they're writing project proposals and budgets. And I wanted to share with you why it is that I'm requiring all of my students as of last December to use ChatGPT for every writing assignment. I know that there's been a fair amount of debate about this on campuses, so I figure it's worth exploring. So the first thing I want to offer is a couple of general considerations that I think are pretty important. One, ChatGPT, as you all know by now, is a free, publicly available tool, and it is not going away. So the first reactions last December on campuses to, how do we stop it? How do we outwit it? How do we write paper prompts so that ChatGPT can't answer the question? All of that, I think, is over, and I think we're beyond it. There are so many other LLM tools like it, and there will be many more incorporated into our daily workflow and life experience. They're clearly going to show up in all of Words and all of Microsoft's products. They're showing up in Google products, although not quite as well. And I think we're simply going to be surrounded by this tool. So one, it's here and it's real and it's not going away. Two, just as I was pretty heavily engaged in the debate about whether we should allow computers in our classrooms or cell phones or digital distractions, I think that we are real world educators, and it's our work to educate our students to live in the world, to thrive in the world, and to make ethical choices in the world. So they will have access to these free tools, and we need to show them how to use them responsibly and how to use them well. Three, I keep seeing all over the internet, ChatGPT will not replace people. People who use ChatGPT will replace people who do not use ChatGPT. I think that's pretty overwrought, but I do sort of agree with the sentiment, and I'll explain in a moment why and what prompted me to figure out how to use ChatGPT for teaching. And finally, this is the most important thing to me. It's not just that it's there and we can't avoid it. It is that I think we now have an opportunity to teach writing and the thinking process that occurs through writing, both more effectively and with more equitable impacts. And I really want to underline more equitable impacts. as we get into this talk, because our students come from so many different backgrounds. They come with such uneven experience, and we tend to teach to the best students, or we tend to teach to the middle. But I've never been satisfied with the progress that my best students and that my most challenged students were having in writing classes. And I am finding that ChatGPT addresses some of those questions and concerns. So first, I want to tell you a quick story. I'm a big chess fan. I wept with Gary Kasparov at the point where he was defeated by Deep Blue in 1997. I was concerned at that point that the world was going to end, as I think a lot of us were. And yet, what I want to point out is the resilience with which by 1998, only about 7 months later, he had turned around his experience and begun to champion what he called centaur chess, also known as advanced or freestyle chess, which is, here's a centaur in the upper right from Athens, which means that we have a human who's writing the computer, that the human computer together can actually play much more interesting and complex chess. And I feel that we're at another one of those points where chatbots, generative AI, particularly publicly accessible tools like Bing AI, are going to be tools that are symbiotic. And unless we learn how to control them, the horse will run away. And also, unless we learn how to mount the horse, we will never ever become more adept at writing as we can be. So I take my inspiration from Gary Kasparov, although obviously I'm not in Kasparov's league. Oops, let me go back one. And the other thing I wanted to just present is my growing sense over the last couple of months that generative AI may have reached its watershed moment. I've seen a number of recent comparisons between this moment, particularly GPT-4's release 2 weeks ago, and what happened when Napster hit the internet in 1999. I very much remember the piracy wars that went on subsequent to Napster appearing on June 1st, 1999. This is a Wall Street Journal cartoon from July 2000 of the new copyright laws attempting to exterminate those filthy bugs that are pirated music all over the internet. And of course, we saw how that went. Piracy, in fact, became pretty widespread until the entire industry rearranged itself and learned how to stream music, and also learned how to tout sound quality over, say, the convenience of an MP3 song that's terrible quality. The kinds of alarmist news items that have appeared in the last couple of months, I think I would highlight the Washington Post just a couple of days ago, an article on how they tested a ChatGPT detector through turnitin.com, which, by the way, launched on the 4th of April, which I think was yesterday or the day before, and how it misses an awful lot of cases. So it gives lots of false positives. It doesn't pick up on the use of ChatGPT when it's a partial use as opposed to a full use. So in other words, I think there's a moment of chaos and rearrangement right now, and also a moment of extraordinary opportunity to find out what our new affordances are going to be. The second watershed moment I wanted to describe to you is my second story, and that is why I built my first class website in 1997, because I feel like we're suddenly there again. I'm about to teach writing in a whole new way for the first time in 30 years. In 1997, I built a class website after a student showed up in my Spanish culture and civilization class and gave a 20-minute presentation on Columbus eating babies in the New World. And as I sat in the room with a stomach ache thinking, what am I going to say about this and how am I going to address this? And obviously, as a faculty member, the first thing I asked was, well, may I ask what your source was? And the student said, well, there's a whole website on it. And I thought, oh no, the world just changed and I was not ready for it. My first experience with ChatGPT gave me the same feeling. And so I feel that we are on the cusp of something fascinating and very liberating. and also something that's kind of terrifying. So speaking of terrifying, this week, the available large language model chatbots are, and I just decided to throw up a list. There's a free version of ChatGPT, which is 3.5. There's a paid version, GPT-4, which is only $20 a month. There are plugins that are currently in early testing, but these will connect generative AI to the internet and to lots of different work applications. I'm currently in testing for a couple of those myself, and I've been playing with Khan Amigo, which is the chatbot that the Khan Academy is currently testing. Bing AI is free with Bing, and it's a mix of GPT 3.5 and 4, although I must say mostly 3.5. Google Bard is free, but seriously, don't bother yet. And Anthropic Claude, which is, I've seen lots of references to, is currently proprietary for business applications, and we're going to see many, many more of those. So just to give you a sense of, ChatGPT is not the only player. And in fact, it may turn out to be something that gets left behind, like Napster was. So, so this is not, it's not a monolithic challenge that ChatGPT exists. I think this is about a major shift in the way we are all going to be doing business. Okay, so why do I require my writing students to use ChatGPT instead of prohibiting them from using ChatGPT? So back to this issue of the thinking process that occurs through writing and also having more equitable impacts. So it's always been hard to teach writing to students who have very different educational backgrounds. I mentioned before, we tend to teach toward the middle, but it's unsatisfying to not be able to reach every student in exactly the way we feel like we should. Also, students do not outline before writing. I'm sure you've noticed this. They're told to write outlines. You might even have them write outlines in class, but this is not part of their general practice. So there is a sense in which a stream of consciousness writing is being turned in. It's not good. It's a huge amount of labor for faculty to address poorly organized, basically first draft essays that are being turned in as completed essays. Students get stuck producing the and I will quote one of my favorite authors, a terrible first draft. And so often they will turn that in without revision at all, particularly if you're teaching iterative writing and allowing multiple drafts. The first drafts are far worse than they used to be. And also because they are so demoralized by the first draft process, they struggle so much with getting their thoughts on the screen in the first place that they come to see writing as onerous and formulaic, and therefore generating something with ChatGPT or one of its competitors seems like a pretty good solution to that. What they truly miss when they simply see this as a struggle is the ideation process that comes through writing. More on that later, but I'm sure you've all had the experience at some point of starting to write and getting to the end and realizing that the topic you wanted to write is actually not the topic you wrote. In fact, you discovered all sorts of interesting things through the process itself. So by clearing some of the brush of the really hard getting a terrible first draft on paper, they're able to start seeing what the possibilities are instead of simply the obstacles. Another reason I require it, students don't know how to revise well. As I said, they tend to turn in first drafts. I, at one point, had a student conference about a paper that was not very good. And I said, so tell me what your process was. And the student said, well, I was walking across campus with my phone. And I said, excuse me? And the student said, yes, I was dictating the paper. And when I was finished, I sent it to you. So that, I mean, that was 10 years ago. So the ways in which students write are so contrary to the ways in which I have typically written, that just trying to come up with a way to get them to think about revising well has been a challenge. And I'm finding that I have a tool now. Finally, if they're cheating by using ChatGPT, which in an informal survey anonymously on our campus last week, we had quite a few students, a high percentage of students, admit that they have used ChatGPT for an assignment, even though they weren't supposed to. If they're cheating with it, they're not doing it particularly well. So if we can teach them to not use it as a secret cheat and instead to use it as an active tool, I think what we're going to see across the board is a better product. I think we'll also see students who can live in the world and thrive in the world. Okay, so this is the nitty-gritty. Here are the things that I believe they need to know and how it is that that ChatGPT in particular, which is what I've been using in my writing classes, has helped us to accomplish these things. The first thing is how to write prompts that are good enough to produce a workable first draft. Currently, students are treating ChatGPT like an oracle, or like Google. So either, they're asking a question or they are asking something so general that they get something completely non-specific and useless. And as a result, I've seen some things turned in that were worse even than a very terrible first draft that had been worked on for a long time. So I think the first thing we need to teach them is how to write a prompt. We are now talking with a machine that functions in a very different way than we're used to. So for example, a standard question that I have seen students ask of ChatGPT, and by the way, I'm giving you a sample from Ethan Mollick's guide to ChatGPT. It came out on the 10th of January. It's online and absolutely a very useful tool for me. So if the prompt is write an essay about how human error causes catastrophes, which might have been right out of a prompt that I would have written for an ethics class, you're going to get something pretty generic and pretty general, and actually pretty hard to do much with. If you teach them then to get more specific and say, okay, write an essay with the following points. Humans are prone to error. Most errors are not that important. In complex systems, some errors are catastrophic and catastrophes cannot be avoided. So that actually starts to produce text that is much more interesting and yet still is not going to be in a style or a level of detail that's workable for editing a draft. So here's my yes, write this kind of prompt. Same thing, write an essay with the following points, and then get more specific. The more specificity they can add, the better. Use an academic tone, use at least 2 clear examples, make it concise, write for a well-informed audience, make it 7 paragraphs, vary the language in each paragraph, end with an ominous tone. Now this begins to get you a draft that you can really work with. So getting students to hone down and to unlearn some of the skills that they have previously used, and getting them to hone down what they really are trying to do. In a sense, we are programming a computer with words. In a sense, we're back to word problems and having to make the problem incredibly specific and put every element in the right order. So just getting students to start writing prompts well is a major start. I think it will help them in their lives. It certainly is helping them in their writing. How to write prompts for an experimental outline. So I now am getting students to write outlines, and they are enjoying it because they are asking ChatGPT to write an outline. So here would be a sample prompt: write an outline with at least 8 subheadings on the subject of, include the first sentence of each outline entry, write the outline for an academic audience in a news style. So straightforward, non-argumentative. Once this happens, once you have a student generate such an outline, then the assignment becomes, how do you examine that outline for logic, for flow? How do you examine for missing elements? What are the extraneous elements? How do you then start to expand the outline with well-chosen details and examples or proof? So I think just having something to work with. I know personally I'm a better editor than I am a blank page facer, but giving them something to work with also gives them examples of, this is actually a pretty good outline. Now, what do we need to do to change it?
And we have one question.
Yes, go ahead.
Is this what is referred to as prompt engineering?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
So we have one question that says, is this what is referred to as prompt engineering?
Yeah, it is. I mean, this is not high class prompt engineering. It is its own field, and it's quite specific. But what I'm doing is providing examples here of prompts that work with writing assignments, of prompts that will work for humanities or ethics writing. Yes, technically this is prompt engineering, but I'm not going to claim to be a prompt engineer. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, great. Getting them to actually write an outline and see the value of it is kind of a wonderful thing. And getting them to move beyond the scrolling screen that they've become used to in just a sort of general flow of thought instead of an organized logical sequencing of arguments has made my job a lot easier. All right, here are a few other things they need to know. And seriously, this list could have gone on, but I've really tried to distill the things that I think one can teach well with ChatGPT into just a few entries. How can they choose better examples? ChatGPT will generate examples, and they're kind of interesting because we get a chance to look at them and decide, is this actually an example of what we're talking about? Often the example is not particularly appropriate. So getting them to think through good design, think about good design through bad design, or think about good examples through bad examples has been a really useful tool as well. How to find and incorporate better quotes. So ChatGPT will generate quotes. They're often false quotes. You'll see number 7, AI lies continually and convincingly. Getting them to start identifying what kind of a quote has impact, and therefore what am I looking for when I go back through a text to find proof. It's been a revelation to me. How seeing an example will really help a student loop back and come up with something far better. How to read for logical argument rather than accept well-constructed nonsense. If anybody has been on, is it ZDNet recently? They just started using completely AI ChatGPT written articles. And what's interesting about them is they have very flashy titles and they have very flashy topics. But when you get to the end of the article, you're not actually sure what you read. It's well constructed. It seems convincing, but it's actually nonsense. A great deal of what our students read online already is that. And so this is both a how to read your own work for a logical argument exercise, but also how do you read the world for logical arguments instead of simply accepting something that seems very professional, but that in fact doesn't say anything. How to cite the contributions of ChatGPT. There's such a huge difference between hiding in the shadows and using it and hoping nobody has a way of figuring it out, and actually acknowledging the ways in which you have worked symbiotically in a centaur-like way with ChatGPT. So this is the instruction I put at the end of every assignment. Please include a paragraph at the end of any assignment in which you have used AI that explains what you used the AI for and what prompts you used to get the results. Failure to do so violates the academic honesty policies in this course. So getting them to see that they can work with an AI and not violate integrity, academic integrity, is, I think, pretty important to making this a tool instead of a cheat. And finally, as I said before, AI lies continually and convincingly. This really allows us to get to the details of how you check facts and how do you smell a rat. And this will help with literacy in general, but if they have a draft and they can see things that are maybe sketchy, or if they see things and they're not even sure how to check a fact, that gives us an opportunity to learn something that we've never made explicit before in my writing classes. Now that's probably partially my fault, but it's incredible to me how much things can be explicit and on the table once you bring light into ChatGPT and how it functions. So here's a sample assignment, a writing assignment that I gave at the end of last semester when ChatGPT was so brand new, faculty weren't even panicking yet. For this assignment, we will start with the AI chatbot ChatGPT. Students had mostly heard of it and they'd played with it and they weren't really sure what to do with it yet. This was for an ethics class. Now that we have read and discussed multiple perspectives on what constitutes the good life, prompt ChatGPT to suggest a 500-word student essay on the subject of the good life. So we use this for them to start using bad prompts and start honing in on what a good prompt is. Copy and include below the text produced by ChatGPT, and then this is the analysis part. They have to turn in what the output of ChatGPT was, and then their analysis of that. Look at what shows up here that you had not thought to include. They had already written an in-class outline. What is missing from the draft? What needs further research and investigation? Is the style appropriate to your audience and the parameters of the assignment? If not, why not, and how might you change it? Third part of the assignment, edit the ChatGPT output showing your work by saving edits and add comments to explain your choices. Since ChatGPT itself is pretty much a black box neural network, it's harder to get ChatGPT to explain exactly what went into the process, but we can get students to get used to thinking about that for themselves. How does this version compare to the version you started in our last class? What have you learned about 1, your writing style and methods, and 2, ChatGPT's writing style from this exercise? Finally, what have you learned about your hybrid writing style? That is you and ChatGPT collaborating on this exercise. So in other words, I don't just say, go use ChatGPT. This is the way I work students into beginning to understand how it functions, what it can do, and what it truly cannot do well. The difference between ChatGPT in December last year and what I'm already seeing in GPT-4 in the last 2 weeks is astonishing. So I can tell you that this is moving very, very fast, and that these assignments will have to be changing all the time in order to keep up with IT developments. So here's the other part that I think is so important. I do most of my best thinking while writing. One of my heroes, Richard Feynman, famously kept notebooks, and an historian who had access to those notebooks said, oh, this is wonderful. This is a record of your day-to-day work. And Feynman objected and said, no, this is not a record of my thinking process. These notebooks are my thinking process. This is me doing the work. And the historian said the work was done in your head, but the record of it is still here. No, it's not a record. It's working. You have to work on paper, and this is the paper. Feynman worked really hard to try to explain this point. And what my students are finally able to do is get some ideas on paper, instead of struggling with each word, get some ideas on paper, and then they have the relieved opening to consider their thinking process. Right, here's a terrible draft. Where do I go? What is my thinking process from here? This functions much like the Renaissance commonplace book that was used by everyone from Erasmus on to work through, what are the quotes I'm picking up? What are the ideas I have? Books that were references for a lifetime and that scholars would go back to over and over. My favorite example of the commonplace book is Charles Darwin, who kept notebooks his entire life. And you can already see 10 years before he publishes on evolution, you can already see in his commonplace book notes that all of the separate ideas are there. He just hasn't united them yet. He hasn't seen the connections among them yet. So being able to get things on paper and then address the thinking process is a critical skill that has been made much easier by ChatGPT. I'm going to stop because I really want there to be the opportunity for discussion, but I will invite you to further discussion beyond this time period too. This is my email address if you have further questions just for me. And also there will be a panel that I'm participating in that will be on Zoom. It's next Wednesday, the 12th, with an expert on natural language processing and a faculty member in human-computer interaction who uses generative AI. And I'm the resident ethicist on this panel. And you're welcome to join in and see what else emerges from the interaction of these different disciplines. So I'm stopping. I will stop sharing. I can now see you. And if you have a question, if you would please either speak up or show yourself so that we can interact, I would very much appreciate it. Yes, I will paste the link into the chat. Thank you very much. I'll do that.
I have a question. As you've been kind of doing this, hi. So I'm an instructional designer. As you've been maybe talking to your peers and other instructors about this, how have you kind of maybe framed it so that it's not that ChatGPT is the enemy and we're trying to fight against it, but that here's how you can really teach your students to be critical about it? What kind of conversations are you having that maybe as we're having faculty who come to us and are nervous about it? What are some things that we can say to help them say, like, no, this could be really great, and it's trying to shape new thinkers.
So what I tried to do in this talk a little bit, I mean, I know it was fast because I just wanted to give you a general gist of this, is distill down some of the arguments I'm making. That if you can point to these affordances, in particular, what has worked with my colleagues who teach writing is, over the last 5 years, we've been in crisis already, trying to understand why it is that the papers we're receiving are poorer quality. They are definitely first drafts. Students are not as prepared to produce logical writing. And so we've already been struggling to try to figure out how to change the way we teach writing. This is an answer. And I think we've all been looking for an answer. And if, for example, you can promise a faculty member, try it with a couple of these prompts and see if it makes your grading of their first version of a paper less horrifying. See if it allows you to do things that you couldn't get to before because you were just trying to address spelling, for example. If they see that you can, how to put this, I'm a surfer. I see this kind of like surfing. You know how it's really, really hard to get through that first line of waves and you keep getting pounded back and back? It feels to me that I've been pounded back and back by the first line of what students are producing and writing. And this is actually more like surfing the wave, that this allows you to push through that front line and then catch the momentum and work with it. So I'm finding that my hours of grading have been reduced, maybe 10 hours a week. And I really can't, I couldn't believe it myself, but I've been so happy about it that it's given me time to figure out what else ChatGPT and particularly GPT-4 now can do. Does that help?
It does. It really does. That's a great frame that you did also with that analogy to surfing.
And I'll post the slides so that you can look back at those points. And actually, I guess this is recorded anyway, so you can rewatch if you want. But I think, just those 7 things, and particularly to me, the other argument is that it's more equitable. We have been unevenly addressing student writing. Mm-hmm. And the students who are better tend to get less attention, and the students who are worse tend to get the most attention, but the least progress. Yeah. And this actually evens the playing field in a way that I never thought we would see.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Are there other questions? I can't actually see. Is Liz, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
I teach over here at Central Washington University in Washington State, and
Hi.
I am just I'm teaching a business communication class, and I'm crafting assignments much like what you just described. I'm a little concerned though about the equity of access to ChatGPT itself and some of the privacy issues if we ask students to use this tool as a required part of an assignment, because it is not under our umbrella, right, of tools that we can provide students with any kind of either tech support or assurances of privacy.
Right.
So I'm just wondering if you've encountered that and how you've spoken with students about it.
Yes, so part of the ethics classes has been looking at what some of the threats are with ChatGPT. And, you know, I think probably everybody noticed that it was quite easy to make a chatbot turn racist very quickly. Tay, I think, was the first example of this, but there have been many others. And what's been interesting to watch is that even GPT 3.5 had enough problems that it was shut down for a while OpenAI tried to figure out how to put in guardrails. And the guardrails, which work better, unfortunately also genericize things such that any deviant opinion, like, you know, for example, evolution, any deviant opinion looks like something that could be off the charts and might actually be eliminated, elided, ignored by ChatGPT. So I mean, I think there are problems of genericizing, also being able to use ChatGPT through a generic email account, which is what I developed for my class, allowed students to log in. They sign up for times. They were able to log in as a generic student instead of identify themselves. We additionally talked about whether they could access through a public computer on campus as opposed to accessing through their private computer, which is traceable. So, I mean, I think it's a fantastic opportunity to talk about the whole spectrum of issues related to generative AI and privacy. So I think you have to talk about all of it in order for it to work.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was a particular roadblock even when I went up to set up an account for myself, right, to start playing with it. It asked for a mobile phone number to verify my account. And I thought, do I want to give them my mobile phone number? So thanks. I would love to at some point, maybe I'll come to the session next week.
Yeah.
Hear more about that.
So, you know, I'm in engineering and I'm kind of known as a rogue faculty member. I nearly got shut down by, I hope there are no OIT people here. I got threatened with excommunication by our IT people for running wikis from a computer under my office desk when they wouldn't allow them. So, so we did, in fact, for the first iteration last fall, when I didn't know what this would be, we used a burner phone. Are there other questions or comments?
Yes, we have a question that's in the chat. This is Jalinda, the moderator.
Oh,
I have to read
thanks.
it off to you.
Yeah, please.
Okay, thanks for sharing this question, Liz. I agree. I wondered about the privacy and security issues that students may not be aware of when signing up for the account. I would love to hear if others have done exercises where the class reads the privacy and terms of the statements, terms of use statements, and have a discussion about their digital footprint and things to be aware of digital media literacy.
Excellent. Yeah, so great. That's an excellent comment. Has everyone here joined the ChatGPT channel on Discord? So for this conference, there's a channel, and if anybody has ideas about this, I will post there some of the excerpts, like, you know, what is my disclaimer for academic integrity? I'm going to post some things there, but if anyone has thoughts about exercises, that would be really lovely. The main class I teach is called The Meaning of Information Technology, and it's really about information privacy and security. So the whole class sets up students for that. But I'm not sure yet how, in a writing class completely divorced from that topic, I'm going to start working them through privacy issues beyond what I just described to Liz. It looks like Derek says, can ChatGPT or other LLMs take new input in the form of PDFs and use that as new material? So yes and no. You can, for example, break an article up into parts and ask ChatGPT to summarize the article or to tell you what its main points are. There's a word limit right now. One of the things I'm playing with GPT-4 is entering some of my own writing and then seeing it, watching it make a draft in my style. And I must say that's really uncanny. But just feeding something into it, like a blog post that I've made or a short essay that I've written, and then saying, now in that style, write a draft of, it's extraordinary. It uses my sentence structure. It uses my vocabulary. So, you know, this is just the beginning. And yes, it can take input, but you have to input text. It will not do PDFs. But it can use new material for prompts. You can, for example, give it a blog post and say, write a summary of this blog post and comment on its ethical implications, comment on unintended consequences, summarize the implications. All of these terms will work in order to insert text. How do we get on Discord? Is our moderator able to describe that? Oh, actually, excellent, thank you. Ryan has already posted the link. So if you go to Discord, and on the left-hand side, there are a bunch of channels for different discussion topics. One of them says ChatGPT. And yes, you have to paste the text. You can't give it a URL at this point. But there are apps for that. I mean, in development right now, there are so many different applications that are currently being tested that will do precisely that. I'm waiting for the combination of Whisper for voice recognition and transcription with ChatGPT. And that's where we start to really get into the sort of science fiction interacting by voice with your personal assistant who's a computer moment. And it doesn't look to me like it's that far away. I appreciate the prompts as well as discussion. Could you address the writing is critical thinking philosophy? Yeah. So critical thinking has always been a sticky topic, right? It's very hard it's a wishy-washy thing, and it's very hard to describe, particularly in engineering where I am, why it's not just a soft skill, which is what engineers call it. In fact, ABET, our accrediting agency, calls critical thinking a soft skill. I think being able to emphasize writing as the act of thinking, writing as the act of developing ideas, particularly writing as an act of translation of your thoughts, which you believe you know what they are, but you can't interact with them until you have them outside of your mind, until you can look at them. That in particular seems to have helped students and colleagues to understand what I mean by critical thinking. I started many years ago to pace back and forth with a headset and Dragon Speak to dictate first drafts so that I could then sit down and interact with my thoughts, because I would face a screen and have the same problem. I'm an old fountain pen user for writing. And what I find is that students haven't tried to do this before. They assume that whatever is output and then printed out and turned in, that's the whole thing, instead of realizing that what they get on the page is the starting point for them to understand how they think. We do this, for example, with values exercises. What are my most fundamental values? Well, they know them in their heads. It's very hard to put them down on paper. And then when they look at them, they think, what does that mean? You know, is that really my priority? So being able to engage with the words on the page, having not struggled so much that they gave up, I think really allows students to start thinking through the process of thinking by writing. ESL, any suggestions for using? So this is interesting. I'm actually working with two colleagues right now to try to figure out how ChatGPT could work. I mean, the first thing we found, this colleague came to me because she detected cheating because she was suddenly getting perfect papers from ESL students. Because another thing ChatGPT is not yet very good at is imitating poor English. But what we're hoping to try and maybe pilot next fall in an ESL writing class on our campus is smaller writing exercises that can be used to start developing student writing style. Also, it's possible now to type in a sentence that you're writing and say, make this sentence clearer, make this sentence better, improve this sentence, so that you can see a new way to write the same thought. And also, if you keep hitting the revise button, all sorts of new ways to write that thought and to capture it. And being able to interact in personal time with a machine that's not judging you. I know we anthropomorphize all the time, but with a machine that's not judging you in the way you think a faculty member might be, actually causes students to practice more, I think. And I believe that this will hold true for ESL students. Does that help answer the question?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I've been, everything you said about what you're seeing from your writers now, like note outline, turning in first drafts, like all of that is very accurate with what I see, because I teach a class that are preparing them for English 101. So kind of, before that, but trying to get them ready. And yeah, they struggle with all that. So I'm just trying to, I know that I want to use ChatGPT and use this to my advantage and their advantage, but just trying to figure out that link, like what is that going to look like?
Right.
How can I help them with that
Right.
being second language,
Yeah.
for English? Yeah. Thank
Well,
you.
and there's also, this is new. I mean, we're all poking around. If we had a community, I don't know if our ChatGPT channel will remain open for the ELCC conference, but if we had a community to suggest the experiments we're running, I think that would really help as well. Let's see, I know we're almost out of time. What are your thoughts on AI checkers? They're terrible so far. Really not good. I recommend you look up the Washington Post article from a couple of days ago on false positives and partial identifies. And I think the Turnitin tool I've already experimented with in the last 24 hours, and I'm not impressed. And I think we won't be able to catch it, so we need to use it instead. I mean, I think we have to channel this as a tool, not try to crush it as a cheat, and that may be the only way I can deal with it. Websites that check for generated text, so far I haven't found any that I think are particularly consistent, but if anyone else has thoughts on that, please let me know, because I would love to explore other possibilities. So what I will do, I realize I'm out of time, and I forgot to put the panel that is next Tuesday in the chat, and I'm not sure I can do it while I'm online. So I will go to the Discord, and I will put that in the Discord ChatGPT channel. And also I will post these slides so that you can look up that information. And also I think the video will be available. It's been amazing, like within 24 hours. So Donna Hall, you are my rock star. Oh, good. Somebody else did it. Wow. Thank you. That's lovely. Is that it? Is there one more burning question, or shall I let you get on to learning other great things? Yes, Uni, is that how you say your name?
Oops. Yes, hi. Thank
Hi.
you so much for your presentation. I really like the assignments you provided to students. So I'm thinking of actually using some of the assignments. But I'm teaching academic writing for mostly English as additional students.
Yes.
So yeah, so I think one person, I forgot the name, asked a similar question. But I'm kind of concerned. I like to try to use ChatGPT for academic writing course as well. But I'm just concerned that the institution culture as well, because my students learn how to use ChatGPT, and then they, used in my class, but then
Right.
if they use in different class, but then if, the other professors, right,
Yeah.
don't
You
agree.
you are
I-
so right. You are so right.
So
And
I
that's
don't
actually
know
an
how to-
excellent point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how I deal with, how I,
Yeah.
equip them, right? Like is that use it in a balanced way.
Right.
My department has a, responsibility, right? To
Right. Right.
hear them, write academic writing. So yeah.
Yeah. So I know we need to end, but it's certainly my sense that we need to inform our colleagues. Just, we need to be open about it. But I'll also confess, I have tenure. And so, where you are in your academic career will make a difference. And yes, I think it's possible that you could be confronted by a faculty member who has prohibited ChatGPT, and then you have to have the conversation. So that's why the slideshow will be available on the Discord channel. The video will be available. And if you want to look at my justifications, that might help you start thinking about what that conversation might look like.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's a
Okay.
good, discussion.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to have everyone here. I'm sorry I didn't get to interact with you personally, but perhaps next year. So have a lovely day. Enjoy the rest of the conference.